I am, to a fault, a last-minute person. Every year like clockwork, I say that I'll set up my decorations the day after Thanksgiving, have all the gifts done weeks in advance, etc. And every year I'm scrambling. This year was no different, which is why on December 17th, I found myself at a tree stand in my neighborhood, willing to drop way too much money for something that I'd only have up for 2-3 weeks max. The tree stand was the same one I always belatedly frequented, but the tree stand guy was new. That didn't faze me, of course. They always seemed to be staffed by a combo of one older man or woman and a bunch of college kids clearly looking to make a quick buck, not make that their career. But there was something off about the fellow who eagerly peppered me with questions and mundane tree facts as he guided me from one potential purchase to the next. For starters, his eyes were too seriously bloodshot. He looked like he was in dire need of some rest. But who didn't? And this had to be a crazy time for him. It wasn't just that though. The eyes were frozen in a wide, almost manic gaze, and he hardly took them off of me. There was also the tick with his mouth. He would never really stop talking, but every few sentences his jaw and teeth would do like frantic clicking action. Click, 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 click. I'd never seen anything like it. To top it off, he was unusually pale, like he'd been living in a sunless Arctic land for years. And all of this was striking, but at the time it didn't seem like a red flag. And I thought, who am I to judge? He was nice and helpful enough. After what seemed like an eternity of learning way more about Christmas tree varietals than I could ever want to know, he brought me to the one that he told me I just had to have. And I was indeed impressed. An 8-foot Douglas fir that was beautifully full and rounded out nicely. None of that weird lopsidedness that so many trees can end up having once you've gotten them home and it's too late. He was right. I had to have it and told him without hesitation, or even asking the price, that I'd take it. The man's eyes widened even further at this, something I thought impossible, and his jaw and teeth clicking seemed to become even more pronounced and frequent. An unnaturally large smile opened across his face, and he took the tree over to cut the trunk and net it. As he began to saw, I heard it. The slightest high-pitched cry, almost like a dog whining. I looked around. The street was busy. The city always is this time, but no dogs in sight. But we were in thick of things, cars buzzing around and people weaving past us. The momentary cry could have been anything. As the man put the net on and rang me up, his smile suddenly disappeared and his look became serious for the first time. You've made a wise choice with this tree. It's very good, but I must warn you, you cannot let it dry out. It can get very thirsty, and you won't be happy if the tree isn't happy. Understood? Fair enough, I thought. The setup process was remarkably easy, and it was a glory to behold, lit up the holy heaven and decked out with twice as many ornaments as any reasonable person would ever use. The man was right. I'd made the right decision and I was happy, optimistic. I filled its water to the brim and went to bed. The next morning was devastating. The tree wasn't dead, but it had transformed and was hardly thriving. It was as if 2 weeks had passed without me watering it at all. The needles were dry and brittle, and the branches were no longer supple and strong, but far too stiff to be healthy. I checked the water and saw it was empty. Weird. Maybe it's just because it's a big tree, or the varietal, I thought. Or maybe it's too hot in the room. But I've never seen a tree devour a full bowl of water in the night, and certainly not one whose condition deteriorated so quickly. I went back to the tree stand that day. A college-aged kid greeted me and offered to show me around. I told him about my purchase and asked to see the guy from yesterday, but as I described him, the kid's look went from initial confusion to complete ignorance. He hadn't seen any guy like that, and he worked most days. The day before, another kid around his age was manning the shop. Not some middle-aged man with pale skin, bloodshot eyes, and an odd tic. Weirder yet, I thought. But maybe he didn't know who all was working there. He was just one employee and hadn't been there the day before. I explained the situation with the tree to him and asked for some guidance. He said I'd done everything right, and I might also check to make sure it wasn't close to the heater, but that was all he could think of. I knew it wasn't. Dissatisfied, I headed home. When I got back, I was shocked. The tree had reverted to its former beauty. No, it was even better. I didn't know how, but I wasn't going to complain. I quickly refilled the bowl and even made sure the heater was off in that room for good measure. A few hours later, the apartment building was filled with a piercing scream, footsteps, crying, and an ambulance outside. One of the older tenants had passed. Sad, of course, but we'd all known the Reaper would come for Mr. Canning soon enough. His wife, a few years his junior, was devastated. The next day, not wanting to bother her, but wanting to offer my condolences, I left a card and flowers on her doorstep. Over the coming days, the tree continued to thrive. It was a sight to behold. I was so pleased that I took the rare step of hosting my own party. Nothing huge, just a handful of friends. But I wanted to show it off to someone. My friends oohed and ahed and made me feel even better about my purchase. My festive mood was dampened when Nick, one of my neighbors, who'd I'd invited, pulled me aside. After some talk, his voice quieted. He had heard from someone else, close to Mr. Canning and his wife, that the old man's death was being marked as due to natural causes, but his body had some odd conditions. Mr. Canning had lost many shades of color, not just the hue that departs us when we leave this world, and he had a few small incisions on his wrist and neck. Weirder still, his body was far lighter than you would expect for a 170-pound man. This had caused Mrs. Canning, even the rumor monger, to claim that there was foul play, but the coroner ruled it out. Other than the anemia and a few cuts, which anyone could have, there was nothing. And the most obvious reason Mr. Canning would have died was because he was just very old. I kept this story with me as I waved goodbye to the last of my guests and shut the door. I turned to admire the tree again, which seemed to get even more luscious and green with each passing day. In the glow of its lights, I took in the smell, the room's silence making the moment feel almost solemn. And in that moment, as I let the spirit of the season wash over me, I heard a familiar sound. Click, 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 click. It started with Kyle. We were going to meet up later that morning for a gaming session, but I had something at work come up and couldn't make it. I called Kyle's cell phone to tell him of the news, but it went straight to an answering machine with an automated voice telling me, "The number you have called has not been recognized." That's odd, I thought to myself. He has changed numbers. Surely he would have messaged me to tell me that by now. I was late for work as usual, and so resolved to drop by Kyle's apartment on the way home. In hindsight, I should have went straight to him. Kyle is the type of person to be a hand's reach away from a phone at all times. I should have realized that something was off, but I didn't. I instead went to work. I had to get that sweet paycheck after all. After my shift, I drove the short 10-minute journey to his apartment. He lived on the 5th floor, almost at the top of the building. And of course, today, the elevator wasn't working. I sighed and began trotting up the stairs until I got to his floor. I quickly looked for the metal-plated numbers. 501, signifying his apartment was behind that door. I walked over to it and knocked at the door. "Who is it?" A female voice answered. "Who is that?" Well, Kyle had mentioned having a girlfriend before. Must be her. "It's Kyle's friend, Daniel," I replied. "I don't know any Kyle. Are you sure you have the right address?" She doesn't know Kyle, and she's in his apartment. That doesn't make any sense. The door suddenly opened and a woman who appeared to be in her mid-20s stepped out. The numbering system this place has going on is confusing, at best. Kyle probably lives on the floor up or down, she said with a smile. I'm pretty sure this is his place. I've been here many times after all. You mean, to my apartment? I looked past her shoulder and into the apartment, and it looked like Kyle had never stepped foot in the place. There were way too many decorations and colors, and overall the place was just tidier. You know what? Never mind. You're probably right. I smiled and walked away. What is going on? First the phone number, and now this. Where is Kyle? As I walked down the stairs, I called Kyle's sister, who picked up almost straight away. I had met her at a small party, and we had hit it off almost instantly. The relationship only lasted a couple of months, but we had parted on friendly terms, and still kept in touch every so often. Daniel, how are you? Hey Meg, sorry to bother you. I just wanted to see if you know where Kyle is. I haven't been able to reach him, and he seems to have moved out of his apartment. Who? Kyle, your brother. I don't have any siblings. What are you talking about? I'm talking about your brother. Is this meant to be a joke? If so, it's not funny. What the hell? She doesn't remember her own brother. What is going on today? I'm not joking. I yell at her. Listen, Daniel, I've gotta go. We can continue this stupid conversation later. I put the phone down with a sigh. This was getting too weird for me. This has to be a prank Kyle set up. Yeah, that's what it is. Just a big elaborate prank. He's probably waiting for me back at home, laughing his head off. Let's go there now. I quickly hopped in my car and practically sped to my house, telling myself all the way about how creative this prank was, making me think I've lost my mind. I grabbed my keys and opened the front door, and there's no one else there but my roommate, Eric. He's a slightly overweight engineering major who would rather die than help clean, but he's a great guy to be with, and I enjoy his company. Eric, has Kyle come by here at all today? Who? Look, if this is some sort of prank all of my friends know about except me, can you just stop it right now? Man, I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, fine, don't tell me then. I storm out of the living room and make my way to my bedroom. I flop down on my bed. Let's just get some sleep. Everything will be better in the morning. How wrong I was. As usual, when I woke up the next day, I went to the kitchen to make myself breakfast. Eric wasn't there, which was strange as usually he wakes up before me. I looked outside and his car wasn't there. Confused, I called his phone. The number you have called has not been recognized, came the automated reply. What the heck? I ran back to his room. Everything he owned, gone. I went through the entire house. There wasn't a trace of him. Even the hole in the wall he made when moving a chair was gone. A smooth section of wall in its place. It was like he never even existed. I couldn't take it anymore. I slumped against the wall and started crying. The last time I had cried was at my grandma's funeral, and even then I had kept my composure. Now, the tears fell freely. I must have sat sobbing there for at least an hour before my phone vibrated. It was Meg. She had texted. Do you want to chat about yesterday? I did want to chat. Yes. What were you going on about then? Do you remember Eric? What? My roommate. I thought you lived alone. Well, I suppose I do now, seeing as how he's gone. Are you okay? Is everything all right? Was I? My life was crumbling before my eyes. People who had existed one day simply vanished the next, and nobody else seemed to realize. I'm fine, I said, even though I wasn't. All right then, see you soon. Bye. The truth was, I was scared. Scared that people were vanishing without a trace. Scared that more people might too. I was scared that I was going insane. But most of all, I was scared that I was next. Since I've last spoken to you, 3 more people have disappeared. Gone, vanished without a trace. The first was Miss Moretti, a sweet little old Italian woman who lived next door. Every so often she would invite me into her home for a meal. "You look so thin," she would say. Come, my Fio. I will feed you up with good food." As I would eat a delicious plate of lasagna, she would recount tales of life in the 1950s, of boyfriends and partying, and occasionally law-breaking. Over time, I had grown to love her like a grandma. I could count on her in any emergency, and she could count on me. But now she was gone, just like the rest. I looked outside my window to a young couple who seemed to take in residence in her house overnight. Of course, they say they have been in this house for 3 years now, which is before even I moved in. They seem happy and tell me that they are expecting a child anytime soon. What I hate the most is the fact that they know my name, and I don't know theirs. It creeps me out. TJ was the second person to go. He was 17 years old and a coworker of mine. When we first got the job, he seemed shy and introverted. He looked to have a good work ethic, so I decided to take him under my wing and train him up. After a couple of weeks of bonding, he opened up to me about his life. He told me that it was his first job and that he enjoyed it more than he thought he would. He also told me that he was a closeted gay, and he was too scared to tell his parents in case they reacted badly. TJ looked up to me, and I felt more like an older brother to him than a coworker. Then he disappeared as well. The third person was my younger sister, Isabel. Her birth had come as a surprise to both of my parents. Nevertheless, they were overjoyed to find out they were having a girl. Right from the get-go, she was bright and bubbly. She was confident and very strong-willed. She was always excited to see me when I visited. And I, of course, loved her to bits. That's why her disappearance hurts me the most. I suppose she's the reason I started writing. I bought a notebook and started filling it up with all I could remember about the missing people. Height, hair color, favorite food, biggest pet peeves. Pretty much everything I could think of went into this journal. I wrote about my personal experiences with them, and generally what I thought about them. Everyone else had forgotten them, and I sure as hell didn't want to either. I've also been recording my observations about what's going on. Once a person disappears, everything they have ever done either vanishes or is replaced. For example, when Isabel disappeared, all my family photos have stayed the same, except for one key difference. She's not in them. Her room had been converted into what my parents called an exercise room, filled with workout equipment. All of Isabella's toys and clothes had vanished. It was like she had never set foot on the earth. I don't think my sanity would have made it if it wasn't for Meg. She was my girlfriend for a period of about 2 years. We had broken up because she had wanted to take it a step further. She wanted to get engaged, to travel the world together, and to eventually start a family. While I do admit, that sounded nice, I just wasn't ready. I told her to give me a couple of months to see how things go. While I could see I had broken her heart, with a bit of nudging, she had eventually agreed, and we left on good terms. That was 3 months ago. Then all this happened. After I had texted her about Eric, my apparently non-existent roommate, she had called me the next day. "Daniel, what's going on with you?" she had said. "I don't really know." "Please tell me. You sound distraught. I just want to help." Well, I might as well, I had thought. And so I told her about everything. About she used to have an older brother. About how I used to have a younger sister. About Eric, TJ, and Miss Moretti. I told her it all, and she had listened. But most importantly, she had believed me. She didn't call me crazy or tell me to go see a doctor. It's like she understood, and I loved her for it. We were getting closer together than even before. We would go on walks together and just enjoy each other's company. She had stopped bugging me about popping the question and had just let things be. We had started going back on dates again, making me realize just how much I missed her. Life was good. Well, As good as it can be when everyone you know and love start vanishing from the face of the earth. But now, for the reason I'm writing this. You see, I think I'm in more danger than I originally thought. Yesterday afternoon, when coming home from work, I went to the bathroom to relieve myself. What I saw chilled me to the bone. Written in a blood-like substance on my bathroom mirror was this message: repent and be forgiven. Sin and be forgotten. I stood there for what felt like an eternity in silent fear. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. This was wrong. This shouldn't be happening. After a while, primal instincts took over and I bolted out of that room. It took some time to muster up the courage to go back. The writing was still there, and I definitely wasn't dreaming. After the initial shock, I took a closer look at the writing. What I assumed was blood was in fact blood. No surprise there. But then I read the message again. What stood out to me was the be forgotten part. That's exactly what happened to Isabel, Eric, and all those other people. They were forgotten. This could only mean one thing. There was something out there who had written this message. There was something out there who wanted me to repent, or else. There was something out there causing the disappearances. And now, it was coming for me. Hi, I welcome you to our establishment. Before you get in, it is my duty to give you this note. You must keep it with you at all times, no matter what. Things here are a little bit uncommon. So to ensure your safety and a nice experience, we recommend to read in detail the paper I deliver to you. This contains rules you'll have to follow. Please do not ignore them. With these words was how I was received in this supermarket. I'm currently vacationing in a small town where a ridiculously small number of inhabitants live. Everything was pretty normal until I decided to come here to, basically, get all the necessary things to stay alive during my time in this place. When I heard those words coming out of the mouth of that employee, I was struggling to comprehend what he meant. I couldn't imagine any similar situation happening anywhere else in the world. Perhaps being in a place with only a few people, they prefer to keep safe with rules to avoid thieves or problems in general. Whatever. I would buy what I needed, and I would simply get out of here to enjoy my trip. I took a cart and noticed an uncomfortable calm around the place. An absolute silence. There wasn't more noise than the people's movements. This intrigued me enough to read the paper, which I had decided to ignore despite the employee's alert. It dictated: 1. Do not interact with any clients. Avoid them at all cost. Each person here has to follow the rules as you do, so they won't disturb you. 2. If a person wants to exchange words with you, ignore them. If they insist, communicate the problem to one of our security guards. You can easily distinguish them among the clients by their uniform, cap, shirt, trousers, and boots. Any person missing one of these clothing items is not part of our staff. Once you have done this, walk the farthest you can and do not look behind. 3. If you are the one breaking the rule, beg so that the person does not call the guard. As soon as you realize you have broken the rule, get away from the hearer immediately. 4. Speakers are going to be the only thing you'll listen to here. These communicate typical information, such as a lost kid or particular situations in some areas. Feel free to ignore it. If any time a countdown of 2 minutes starts, search for an excellent hideout. Believe me, you do not want to be found. Ignore anything you hear, anything you see. You must be there for another 2 minutes. Once the time has passed, you can continue shopping. 5. This rule is unlikely to occur, but you better keep always alert. If the speaker starts saying your name, Close your eyes, cover your ears, and wait 30 seconds. If they have not stopped, find a guard to accompany you to the place you are being called from. Now, you must be totally focused. If the guard is taking you to the office next to the entry, tell him that it's not your turn to get in yet. The guard will let you go. On the other hand, if the guard seems to go upstairs, you are dead. Run, search for the closest exit, and if you're lucky, you'll manage to escape. Take into account Rule 12. 6. Accidents can happen. If a product breaks or its contents made a mess, communicate it to a janitor. He is not always in the same place, but do not ignore the situation. Find him and tell him about an 04 code, but not where. Get the farthest you can from the zone of the accident. 7. The janitor is always carrying with him a bucket full of water and a mop. If you find him without these things, maybe it's better for you to keep what happened a secret. 8. There are some products which you clearly have never seen before. Products which stand out for being things that humans would not consume. Do not take them out of their place. Do not touch them. And for God's sake, do not buy them. They're not for you. If you're seen with any of these in your hands, you will be thought to be with them. If you break this rule, there is nothing we can do for you. 9. If you want to know any product's price, you can reach one of our screens, which include a barcode reader. It is probable that when you're scanning a product, some particular images might appear on the screen. Stare at them until they disappear. They will try to distract you, but you must be strong. 10. Security cameras are only located among the hallways. If you see one anywhere else, tell the guard that they're seeing too much. He will understand and solve the issue. Do not look at the camera for a long time. You have to be really sure about this rule. The guards hate wasting their time, so think it carefully. 11. To pay for your products, we only have 12 cash registers working, which are put in order. If you see any with a different number, or a number which is not in order, do not go through that one. 12. You must give this paper back to the guards next to the exit door. They will not remind you of it. This rule is entirely your responsibility. If you break this rule, you may have some unexpected visitors at home. If you had to follow Rule 5, just make sure at least the paper is inside the building when you leave. Please, do not make things difficult neither for you nor our clients, and follow every step carefully. Everything will be all right. We hope you have the best possible experience. I was aghast. What the heck did I just read? I stopped looking at the paper just to find out that I was alone. I didn't know where the people had gone to until my brain decided to pay attention to what I was hearing through the speakers. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Shit. All lights suddenly turned off. I couldn't believe they weren't joking. Alone against the unknown, I tried to keep calm. Firstly, checking my cell phone to call for some help. No signal was there. I started feeling that I had to run, but I couldn't move until I heard strong footsteps coming directly to me. It was too late. I was taken by hands with texture I find very hard to describe. Those were the longest 2 minutes of my life, until the lights came back on. I had no clue where I was, but according to what I difficulty saw through the windows, I was at that damn office the rules mentioned, sitting on a chair. I could recognize a human voice in the room next to me when the door that connected them both opened. The ugliest and most terrifying man I have ever seen appeared just to sit on his desk. He started writing some kind of documents, but without taking an eye off of me. It was a long time ago since I was that scared. Although I spent hours inside that office, I couldn't relax at any moment. I was starting to feel really tired. My body and mind demanded to me some rest. That sense of tiredness was suddenly interrupted by screams. followed by the lights turning off again. How was I handling all that pressure? I have no idea, but it surely helped when I saw a girl right next to me. We both were in the same situation. Some may think that that's arrogant, but one part of me was happy to have some human company with me. The supermarket closed, and the man writing the document stood up from his chair. I was amazed when I found out how enormous he was. He grabbed us with his hands to go to another place. How could we escape from such a beast? Apparently, we were on the zone where meat was produced. The first thing which caught my attention were the jars. Hundreds of them were through the place, filled with, as you may think, meat. Was it human? Were those jars the products the rule said humans would not consume? I really didn't want to find out. I had to escape. Every scenario I imagined ended in a fatal way, but I had to try. I didn't want to become food for who knows what. Only 2 chefs were with us. They were as horrific as the man who brought us here. We had the advantage that we were able to move. We were sitting only with the limit of our fear. I could beat it. I stood up and started running to the only window there, planning to break it with a chair. Those creatures seemed not to be conscious at all. It was the perfect opportunity, until I remembered about the girl. I yelled at her to hurry up once, twice. She didn't react. Anyways, I don't know about her, but I wanted to live. Again, where it all started, I had to find an exit, but everything was locked. It couldn't have been that easy. I heard some vehicles outside. They were being received by some employees to get some new products. I only had to wait. Not taking so long, my time arrived. The doors opened, and I ran as fast as an Olympic runner when I heard a voice telling me to stop. It was that girl. I started to pale when I saw where I had run through. A cash register with the number 87 above it was right on my way. I fainted. Now I'm here, alone, waiting for something to happen, I guess. In an endless room with the supermarket's appearance. Just that and me. I hope that if this message reaches a sane person, it will be enough for them to stay away from this place. I don't know if I'll return, but if I do, my life will surely be a nightmare. I still have this stupid paper with me. I have always been cautious of the forest, knowing my limits and never going too far when I don't know the area. When I was younger, I lived in a place where my backyard was the woods. I have always loved them and cherished the memories I have had in the embrace of the trees. But recently something happened. I am figuring out where to begin, since I haven't told anyone this. If I go to the police, they'll wave me off and ignore me, so I'm at the loss for the right words. Even though this is a story platform, I would love recommendations and ideas of people I can go to if anyone can help. But anyway, I love autumn and everything that comes with it. The temperature change, the leaves, and the brisk air that goes into your lungs and fills you with a warmer feeling. I love it enough to take time off work and go on an annual hiking trip. I live in Alberta, only to take a trip back to Saskatchewan in September, going north and walking through the bush. I'm gone for a few days before returning home, but whatever. I usually tent it and go for about 50 kilometers. I've been doing this for the past 6 years and do not regret it. I just got back from my hiking trip and strongly need to write this. I drove down a week ago and parked alongside the highway, getting up and venturing in with a GPS, my phone, a book, and any food I needed. It was always peaceful, with the initial few steps feeling great as I walk in, starting my trip. I walked for the better part of the day, stopping a few times to eat and drink water as I walked nearly 20 kilometers on the first day. I pitched the tent and headed in for the night, only to hear rustling and moving about 50 meters away. I got up, looking out at the woods and couldn't see anything at first. The fire I had set up hadn't gone out yet, so I watched for a few minutes when I finally saw what looked like a humanoid figure stepping back into the shadows. I screamed out to them and got no reply, so I figured I was tired and just needed to sleep. So I slept. The following day, I got up and kept walking, having everything packed up as I continued on. It was a typical day, as I had only seen a deer and a bear from a distance. I thought nothing of the previous night and took another 20-kilometer hike, stopping for the night again. The second night was hell. Every few hours, I started hearing whispers. I initially thought it was a bunch of stupid teens pranking me, but now that I'm 40 kilometers in the bush, I have no idea what the noises were. They spoke in a low mutter, waking me up a few times as I kept getting a chill down my spine. The first time I woke up to it, I opened the tent and saw absolutely nothing. The fire had gone out, and the trees were dark. I kept watching the trees, expecting to see someone hiding, but I saw nothing, so I went back to bed. I woke up a few hours later and swear on my life I heard someone muttering a few meters away from my tent. The mumble was low and grisly, but it was human. I ripped open the door and stared, seeing nothing for a moment before catching a humanoid creature running away on all fours in my sight. Now, believe me when I say, I thought I was going crazy. I felt tired, so I chalked it up to a nightmare mixed with reality, falling back asleep. Then the next day I packed my stuff up and started heading back to the truck. It was going to be a 40-kilometer hike, so I walked quicker than usual. I passed many landmarks in only a few hours before noticing something was off. One of my landmarks was a clearing. It felt artificial, but I didn't think anything of it as I passed through the first time. Now on my way back, I stopped before the clearing, freezing almost at the sight before me. There were bodies and limbs askew to branches on trees, and blood in every direction around the clearing. I know this was not here before. I know I would be able to see this, and this was done professionally. It felt like a ritual or shrine as I walked through it, maybe even a battlefield where the bodies were just left to rot. I made my way through this, taking a picture to show authorities once I got out. Maybe 5 kilometers after that sight, I saw one of the most terrifying displays I hope I ever witness. When I was walking, suddenly ahead of me, maybe 50 meters or so, a man wearing a black suit stood still, staring straight at me with his arms resting in front of him, almost standing at attention. It felt unnatural and bizarre. I slowly walked closer and shouted out to him, "Hello?" No response. I chuckled nervously to myself and spoke, getting closer. What are you doing?" No response. Now, I felt something was severely off. I changed my trajectory and was planning on walking past him. He was creepy as hell and kept staring at me. I had a horrible feeling in my gut as I started picking up the pace. Suddenly, the guy dropped to his hands and feet, staring and contorting his body before letting out a weird crackly breath. I also heard the rustling of leaves surrounding me as I looked around and realized he was not the only one. There was someone behind me and to the left and right. Everyone was wearing suits and getting on all fours, breathing harshly. Suddenly, there was silence. All of them stopped breathing and simply stared at me. Looking back, I realized that every one of their eyes turned white in the few seconds of silence. I looked around, now jogging to get out of this messed up diamond. Then, with minimal sound, all of them started sprinting at me on all fours, making no breathing noises or hoofs as they silently ran through the crackling leaves. When they started sprinting, I ran as fast as possible, kicking the one ahead of me in the arm and making them stagger. As I ran, I heard the leaves behind me break and crackle under the creature's limbs. After an eternity of running, I listened to a ghastly howl and a messed up cry as the leaves stopped cracking. and then I only heard myself running. I kept jogging for another kilometer before slowing down and turning around, seeing absolutely nothing behind me. It was terrifying and eerie as I walked to my truck, got in and drove home. I cannot begin to describe this messed up encounter to the degree it deserves. I can only express the fear and uncertainty I have now. Everything I've seen is improbable, and I'm at a loss for what I should do. I do not know what to do. I do not know who to tell. What the hell do I do? Just a bit of context. When my mother was 12, my Uncle Jerry became mute. The doctor said that he had a stroke and that he would never talk again. Until a month ago, I had never really thought about it too much. I rarely saw my uncle in my daily life. I only saw him if an event like a birthday party or a holiday were happening. So to me, it just seemed reasonable. I never bothered to ask any further questions about it, since I didn't really care for my uncle. Plus, people with disabilities are common, so why would I suspect anything unusual about my uncle? My grandmother died about 2 months ago, which was a shame, since it was 7 days before my 28th birthday. I was distraught, since she was so kind to me, so I decided to cancel my birthday party to go to her funeral. Her funeral happened 2 days before my birthday. After the funeral, I asked my grandpa if I could stay at his place for a bit, and of course he agreed. I needed some time to grieve, and it sure as hell wasn't gonna be in my cockroach-infested apartment. I stayed in the house, mostly talking with Grandpa. He made me stay in the guest room, which was fine. The bed was soft, and there wasn't any critters to bother me. During the day, we talked about his life, and most importantly, my grandmother's life. My grandma was an 89-year-old woman. She managed to survive stage 4 cancer when she was 49, which was deemed as a miracle. My grandparents and my mother were extremely religious because of this. My grandpa met her when he was 25 and she was 23, and they bought this house when they were married 10 years later. My grandpa's house was a 3-floor, 9-room mansion kind of place. I stayed in the house for a few weeks, just grieving and giving comfort to my grandpa, since my mother had work and no one had my uncle's phone number. My uncle didn't even know his mother died during the first week. Then, the second week came along, and something odd happened. It was a Monday. During the night, I heard crying. At first, I thought it was my grandpa, so I gave it much importance. I got out of my bed, and before I reached the door, I noticed that the crying wasn't coming from my grandpa's room. It was coming from mine, more specifically, from the vent. At first, I thought I was just having some idiotic dream. I'm prone to bizarre and nonsensical dreams from time to time, but I clearly noticed that I was awake. I could feel the soft wood under my feet, the harsh cloth from my hand-me-down shirt. Of course, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I thought my grandpa was stuck in the vent for some reason. But then I realized that the crying wasn't in my grandpa's voice. It was in another voice. The voice of a kid. It couldn't be the voice of a kid older than 7 or 8. But my half-asleep mind could only feel fear. I couldn't stay in that room. I had to get out. I went to the kitchen and served myself a glass of water. I fell asleep on the floor, and my grandpa woke me up the next morning. I tried to explain what I heard, and all I got was a saddened stare from him. 4 days passed, and my uncle finally realized that his mother had died. He came to Grandpa's house, tears falling from his eyes. When he knocked on the door, it was me who opened it for him, and he just pushed me out of the way and went to look for Grandpa. Grandpa was cooking lunch at the time. It was about 2:30 p.m., and when he found him, he gave him a hug that lasted for a good 5 minutes. My uncle didn't have any way to properly say how sorry he was that he missed his own mother's funeral. He stayed in the house for a weekend. He hardly interacted with me, but that was okay. He just needed some time. He left soon enough. We didn't even notice. It was the start of the 3rd week. Up to that point, I didn't hear the crying again. Not until Friday. This time, I was talking with my grandfather about what he was going to do next. If he was going to try to remarry, or if he was just going to live alone until he died. Before he could answer, something started to cry in the vent right above us. I knew this couldn't be some sort of audio hallucination because he reacted too. All he did was look at me in silence, and I looked at him back. It took a good 3 hours for the crying to stop, and my grandpa, as soon as it was over, he asked me, "Do you want to hear a story?" I just responded yes. I didn't have anything else to say. I was too freaked out by the crying to say any more. My grandpa gave me a saddened glare and started to tell me the story. You see, when your grandmother was suffering from cancer, she was desperate. She wasn't ready to die, especially when she had a 12-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. So we prayed. We prayed for her to get better, but she only got worse. After some time, she took the matter into her own hands, and if the one above wasn't going to help, the one below would. He looked at me, trying to see if I could understand what he meant, but before I could even react, the crying came back, this time only for 5 minutes. But the one below is a cruel dealer. He knows that a dying woman isn't any good at contracts. But this opportunity was a great one for him, so he told us to take in one of his workers, where he would live until we croaked. But it didn't end at that. He wanted us to give it a voice, a soul. I don't know what we were thinking, but at the time your mother was so infatuated with her little boyfriend that we just couldn't be so cruel as to take it away from her. So we allowed the creature to take it from the next best thing. I couldn't believe what he was saying. It was just abnormal. That's why we lived so long. That's why you're talking to me when you're 28. And that's why your uncle is so separated from the family, and why he is silenced. The crying came back. Whatever the hell it was, the demon, the thing inside the vents, the creature was just screeching. It was louder than before, way louder. It got my tinnitus to act up horribly. My grandpa rushed me out of the door, screaming that he was sorry. I got into my car and drove away. I drove away for hours, but to me it seemed like days. I woke up inside my car at some fast food parking lot. I went and got myself a burger to eat. I was starving. I then drove to my apartment. It had been so much to understand that I just didn't think about it. It hurt to think. It hurts my brain just typing, but that's not the worst part of it all. In that night, I had a dream. I had an odd, terrible dream. All I could see in it was blood, fire, burned soil, and dead trees. And I heard something. Something that I could so vividly remember that it makes me wonder if it was a dream. I heard the next words. "As long as you two live, it shall live with you. If anything were to happen, and one lasts longer than the other, the first person you tell shall take the curse from you. And as long as they survive, it will survive, and you will too. But they will carry the creature no matter how much they avoid it, and it will always be watching, always hungry." I heard that in my dream, but it wasn't with a voice. I heard those words without hearing them. I woke up that night. Something was crying in the vent. It has been a month after that. I can feel the presence of something in the walls. It hasn't let out any more crying so far, but I don't know what to do or what to think. Any advice? We're talking a modern office chair from IKEA, not some sofa I purchased from an antique store with blood scratches along the back. No, this thing is bright blue with wheels, for God's sake. In the light of day, it couldn't be more unremarkable, to the point that I'm sitting on it as I type this. That's part of the problem. I guess I should give you some background, mundane as it is. One fine summer morning, I drove down to the nearest IKEA, tried out a couple of chairs, picked one, and dragged the box home to attempt putting it together. Now, I'll admit that if it was at some point in this process that the chair became demented, it was probably during that ordeal. I lost a wheel, put the back on wrong way round, and messed up an arm so badly it hasn't stopped wobbling even 3 years later. That's the arm on the chair, not mine. But hey, it ended up functional enough, albeit with a wooden block in place of one of the wheels. It served its purpose admirably, and that I forgot about it completely for the remainder of the day. Come 6 p.m., I tucked it snugly in the desk and left to get dinner with a few friends. Well, past midnight, I stumbled back into my room, thoroughly drunk, and conked out on my bed. So far so good. At some point in the night, my bladder woke me up, as it will do when you've ingested about a gallon of liquor. The moment I was conscious enough to register my surroundings, a feeling of absolute dread took over. Like, you know those stories of people who wake up inexplicably in the middle of the night to discover the gas was left on, or that someone's broke in. That was the way it felt like. Lizard-brainy certainty that something was very wrong. I sniffed for a gas leak or smoke. Nothing. I held my breath until I was woozy of air, listening for signs of someone else in my apartment. Nothing. I must have sat there for 10 minutes straight, trying to suss out the source of my mounting anxiety. And that's saying something considering I felt like an overfilled water balloon with a hangover. Eventually, I had to get up and tiptoe, yes, frickin' tiptoe, to my bathroom. After which I sprinted back to my bedroom and attempted to jump under the blankets immediately. I say attempted, because as I stood there in the doorway with the view of the whole room, I knew precisely what was wrong with it. The chair. It hadn't moved or anything. It was still sitting inoffensively right where I left it. But the idea that it was meant to be somewhere else hit me with a certainty that I could neither reason with nor ignore. I didn't quite know how it was meant to be though, so I went over and started turning it experimentally, left and right. I didn't even realize it was facing the mirror when it was finally satisfied. The feeling of relief, just as intense as the anxiety from before, was enough to send me shuffling to bed without another thought. That's how things were for the next 3 years. Every night I'd brush my teeth, take a shower, and turn the chair towards the mirror before going to bed. Now, I assume at this point people will assume I'm either very dense or blowing the events of that night way out of proportion. Here's your explanation. I have OCD. It is logical to feel compelled to turn your chair in a specific direction every night. No. But it's no less ridiculous than needing to click your pen 15 times before you use it, or tap your refrigerator door 50 times after dinner, or tap your hands together 5 times whenever you hear a specific word, or, look, you get the picture. It was just one more thing to add to an ever-growing daily itinerary. I won't lie. Some of my compulsions have felt something like the panic I've described. At the time, I even went over my daily routine in my head to make sure I hadn't missed any, but at no point have I ever felt that I was in immediate mortal danger. For a while, I assumed my OCD had just gotten worse. I've had flare-ups at different points of my life. I resigned myself to riding out another one. Had the status quo remained, I wouldn't be posting this now. The latest development in the chair saga is unusual enough that I can't explain it away as a symptom of my rocky mental health status. I've begun to miss the thing, not the sort of nostalgia you usually have for home when you've been away. I found myself cutting trips short, leaving my part-time job early, cleaning off dinner plates, all to come back and sit in my chair. It was subtle at first. I thought I was just tired and wanted a cup of tea. I had something I needed to finish. I had an overwhelming desire to sit in my beloved chair and stare out into space for an indefinite period of time. On the nights that I do stay out late, I feel like a neglectful girlfriend and have to fight the urge to shuffle into bed, avoiding eye contact with the disapproving bit of furniture. I hope I don't need to state that. This is not what my OCD feels like, or has ever felt like. At no point have I tried to establish a friendship with my fridge, for example. It's an entirely alien sensation, and one that keeps intensifying every day. Already, I think I've become incapable of taking the chair back. I know if I ever did get rid of it, I'd feel like I tossed a cherished family pet into the wood chipper. No, I'd go back for it. I'm sure of that. I can't let it go. Before anyone asks, no, it's not sexual. I don't want to do anything in the chair other than sit in it, or maybe no one was going to ask that. I didn't think of it though. A few horrified hours of Googling later knew enough to rule out the possibility. I also know a lot more about objectophilia than I have ever wanted to. Does someone have any clue what I should do now? Please don't suggest that I get rid of the chair. I truly can't. No, I haven't tried. I feel too guilty just considering it. I'm beginning to worry that this unwillingness to leave it behind will either end in me never leaving my apartment or in bringing it out with me wherever I go. Both situations I'd like to avoid. I smiled, finishing the final touches on the painting. It was an interesting choice. I remember how amazed I felt when I first learned about the technique. With the addition of herbs to the paint and a rare stroking style, a portrait could be transformed into a masterpiece. It seemed too good to be true, but here it was. I took a step back, admiring the work. The wavy chestnut strokes flowed down the shoulders of the girl inside the canvas. Her lips quirked up in a smile. I wondered if anyone would ever ask me why the girl was smiling. I didn't have a response to that. She always smiled. That's how she was. Her eyes were beautiful, round, sparkly, glimmering with life. In one hand was a paintbrush. She loved to paint, like me. She was tidier though. My shirt constantly had paint stains on it, but hers was cleaner than reason. I wasn't sure why I added that. It just looked right. "Lorna," my mom called out from the stairs. "Time for school." I didn't bother to reply. Those eyes kept me enchanted, locked into their gaze. It almost felt like I could reach out at any moment and touch her, feel her skin on mine, laugh when she laughed, wept when she wept. We could be friends, I thought. I never had friends. My painting took up all of my time. "Lorna!" Mom screamed again. I broke free of my stupor and realized with a start that I'd almost managed to ruin the paint. My fingers shook just an inch above the swirling mix of color, trembling as I returned them to my sides. I'd almost ruined the painting. I grabbed my bag at the side, not bothering to clean up my hands as I went downstairs, ready to start another day at hell. When I got back to my bedroom, I was horrified. Streaks of red trickled down the cheeks of my masterpiece. The liquid was still wet, dripping down across the canvas onto the floor. My painting was crying blood, and I knew who was responsible. I ran to the living room, screaming at my little sister, Jessie, about what she'd done. I yelled every single word I could think of, calling her worthless and annoying. I couldn't control myself. My world had turned red, and instead of cleaning it up, I decided to paint it black. That night, Jessie slept alone, crying herself to sleep. "What's wrong with you?" Mom asked, once my sister fell asleep. "It's just a painting. Just a painting. Just a painting." This was my magnum opus. I wanted to scream, to cry, to stomp my feet and throw things until anger faded. Enraged, I slammed the door shut with such force it rattled my bones. I turned to the painting. The anger dissipated in seconds. Why'd I been so angry? It wasn't like I couldn't clean it up. I grabbed the tube of titanium white I kept nearby and got back to work. Hours went by in the span of minutes. I treated every stroke with care. My hands moved with a precision that even a surgeon would be hard-pressed to match. I wasn't sure when I stopped, but when I did, the world turned black. I woke up in shambles, realizing what I'd done. I ran to Jessie's bedroom. There she was. Guilt tore at my heart. She looked so small, so precious. I couldn't even think of hurting her the way I did yesterday. She must have felt me staring because she woke up. I have never felt so terrified. She was thin, like a skeleton. Her face seemed to have been aged by 10 lifetimes. Her skin was pale as bone, and when she opened her mouth, maybe to ask me why I scolded her the way I did, because no one deserves to be treated like that. The effort seemed to physically exhaust her. She reached out, as if to hug me, but collapsed onto the ground. I ran to get Mom. Every minute we spent waiting for the ambulance felt like an eternity, until finally they wheeled her into the vehicle. My heart didn't stop racing until the hospital came into view. I didn't go to school that day. The doctor said she lost a lot of blood, but she had no visible wounds, not even scarring or anything of the sort. The blood had vanished overnight. My mom slept with Jessie in the hospital. I went home, not bothering to turn on any of the lights as I charged for my bedroom. The next few minutes are a blur. I walked in, and my mind just stopped. There, in the center, my magnum opus continued to weep tears of my sister's blood. Her lips still caught in her malevolent smirk. It didn't stop there. Over the next few days, everyone I knew began to experience the symptoms. Family, teachers, even classmates I've never met in my life. My mom's almost on her deathbed, but I think I managed to figure out a way to stop it, at least for now. I'm sorry, so sorry. My mom's insurance was enough to cover her medical bills, thankfully, but I needed to do something. She wants me, you see, she wants me all for herself. She doesn't like to share. But I don't think she can keep doing this, not at the rate with which she nearly killed my sister. I think it's because she's focusing in on more people, and that's where you come in. I'm sorry, okay? But Jessie, she actually smiled today and walked. The doctors say she can make a full recovery. She and my mom are all I have left. You can save yourself too if you want. Spread the word to whoever you can, friends, family, even a stranger on the street. You know that annoying coworker who keeps stealing your food from the fridge. They could all vanish overnight. All you have to do is spread the word. She was always kind and bright to everyone she met. The warmth she radiated to those who came to her was as welcoming as the sun's rays after a storm. However, it seemed too fake for me. I don't know if it was because I'm a chronically cynical person, but her smile always seemed so off, as if she was trying to hide something. But what could such a wonderful person be doing to warrant such an off-putting smile? "Good morning, Miss Valerie," I shouted while watering my flowers. The woman was in the middle of emptying out her car trunk when she responded back. "Good morning, Holly. It's rare to see you out this early in the morning." I'm not necessarily a morning person, so it was a strange occurrence for me to be out so early. But I had this dull urge in the back of my head to go outside for some reason. I saw on the news yesterday that a heat wave will be hitting the area within a week, so I wanted to water my plants before it got too hot just in case. "Would you like some help putting your groceries in your house?" The smiling woman simply waved off my help. It's good, darling. I haven't gotten too old that I can't pick up a few bags of groceries. She laughed as she closed her trunk with a force that could chop a grown man's finger off. It almost made me jump if it wasn't for her still looking in my direction. Every part of my body wanted to get out of this conversation that I, for some reason, started. Well then, have a good day, and make sure you stay hydrated during the heat wave. I most definitely will, Holly. Thank you for your concern. As I watched the woman carry her bags of grocery into her house, I noticed how weirdly strong she was for a woman in her 40s. She carried 2 gallons of milk, a gallon of water, and 3 sacks of sugar, as if she was carrying small trinkets. I couldn't understand why, but I found later the reason why my body woke me up so early. 2 days had passed, and the heat wave was hitting hard. Kids couldn't play outside with almost passing out. The water in the lake behind my house was emitting steam from being boiled by the sun. Even the air conditioning was having such a hard time cooling the house down. It was also during this time that people started going missing for some reason. Everyone was so focused on trying to combat the heat that no one realized that 4 people had gone missing until it was reported on the news. At first, the police officers just did a general search of the areas that these people lived in. Due to the heat wave, it was way too hot to do a search on foot because officers would end up fainting from heat exhaustion. During the search, the officers also took the time to ask neighbors if they had seen the missing people. One of the people that went missing was from my neighborhood, so the officers ended up coming to my house as well. They provided a case of water bottles, which I greedily accepted, and started to question me about the person who went missing. I didn't really know the person, so I couldn't give much information. The officers thanked me for my time, then proceeded to that woman's house. I actually haven't seen her these past couple of days since I holed myself up inside my house, but seeing her unsettling smile again as she greeted the officers shot shivers down my spine. The officers didn't spend too much time at her house either and began to walk away when, suddenly, another police car zoomed over to where the officers were and beckoned them into the car immediately. The officers immediately ran and jumped into the car, but as they did, I noticed that the woman never dropped her smile. It just became creepier. Nothing about her face changed. It was the way she stood there and watched the police car, smiling without going back inside her house. Almost like how someone continues to smile after enduring a conversation they were forced to listen to, just in case the person turns back around after walking away. But the way she was handling herself just made it so uncomfortable to look at. I was about to go back into my house before that woman caught me staring when, simultaneously, the officers dashed out of the police car and barged into the woman's house. One of the officers handcuffed the woman, still smiling, and dragged her to the police car. The loud noise caught the attention of the neighbors, who are now coming out of their houses to see what is going on. I can still vividly remember the words that woman said just as she was being shoved into the police car. Nosy people should just worry about themselves. She was staring directly at me as she said those words, as if it was a better late than never warning. Just as the police car door closed, the officers began to file out of the house with the 4 missing people, plus 5 other people who were reported missing over the course of 3 years. All of them were in the same conditions: food poisoned by spoiled milk, clothes drenched in water, caramelized sugar hardened over their mouths with only a small hole for a straw to fit through, random cut marks over their bodies. It's been 9 years since that day. If I had never seen her that morning with her groceries, I would have never believed that it was her doing. After that day, I continued to mind my own business like I always do, but I could never smile again. Every time I smiled, it would remind me of that woman's smile. Is that why you seclude yourself in your home, Miss Holly, so that you wouldn't have to smile at anything? I seclude myself in my home so that I don't go running my nose in other people's business. Although my life is crappy, I still want to live, so I would rather not cut it short. The therapist's phone rings, so she excuses herself to answer it. It wasn't a long phone call, but it is one that abruptly stopped our session. I'm sorry, Miss Holly, but we have to end our session here. It's not a problem. There's still next week. I say my goodbyes and leave the office. As I left the building and headed over to my car, I couldn't help but smirk to myself before going home.